घड़िया ले रहे हैं जहाँ दुकान मिल जाए पर भूख से ज़्यादा पूरा भुला रहा है रखी है खड़ी है अंदर भी ना आने देंगे कपड़ों
My name is Nina. Welcome to our museum. We are in the Central Museum of the Great Patriotic War. This war started on the 22nd of June 1940 against Nazi Germany and its allies. It was a big part of the Second World War. Now we are in the museum, which occupies a very big territory, 135 hectares. Here there is not only the building of the museum, but also the open-air exposition of military weapons. You can take pictures there, and if you have questions, I'll be very glad to answer.
सारे सैनिक दिखाए 2,70,00,000 लोग मरे थे सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वार में। जैन के सैनिक ना
The fortress of Brest. This fortress was one of the fortresses along the western border of the country, and it was located on the border of Belarus and Poland. Belarus was the part of the Soviet Union at that moment, and inside the fortress there were 3,000 militants and 11,000 civilians. In the city lived in such flats. If you look around, you will see that this is the furniture of 1930s, 1940s. All the artifacts are authentic here. So the 22nd of June was Sunday, the weekend. Many officers wanted and planned to spend this weekend together with their members of the families, but after 3 in the morning, the Nazis started shelling the fortress, and the war started. The officers were in their and now we're inside the Kazan of the has already started. Many soldiers tried to fight and to resist, and some of them went up for drinking, but also for wetting their machine guns. However, they were often shot by the Nazis, and many families, including women and children, also perished because the Nazis ruined their houses, and some of them perished under ruins. Well, doctors also were inside the fortress, and they ran to the hospital because they needed to help the wounded. And we can see, yes, and here some guns, some weapons were preserved, but the protectors of the fortress remembered the Nazis used artillery weapons, they used tanks.
ऐसे सिचुएशन को वो इमेजिन करके
मैं भी इस प्रकार भेजा
And this is, God bless you, this is the real hospital which was here before the war, and now when the war has started, you can see the wounded who try to protect the hospital and some nurses. These nurses were very young, they were 19 years old. One of them tried to hide a wounded soldier, but she was killed by the Nazis. And on the second day of the war, the Nazis used women, children, nurses, doctors, and the wounded as a human shield. And they made them run.
Germany soldier.
जर्मनी सोल रहे हैं ये गाड़ी भी जर्मनी वाला भी जर्मनी
मैगी मैदान में है
And now we're inside the yard of the fortress, and you can see a hard battle. The fortress was attacked by one of the the most powerful Nazi divisions. This division comprised 15,000 soldiers, and there were 3,000 soldiers who protected the fortress. So now you can see the Nazi soldiers. They had a plan to capture the fortress within 8 hours, up to 12 o'clock, but their plan wasn't realized, and they didn't understand why it happened. Their commander ordered to shell the fortress with big bullets and rockets. The weight of some of them was from 700 to 1,400 kilos. Which is close to the border. And now we are inside the basement of what tried to hide women, children, the wounded, but the Nazis used flamethrowers and killed these people. The commanders said all the women that they needed to leave the fortress because it was too dangerous for women and children to stay. They were captured by the Nazis, and some of them were paraded, some of them were shot in 1942. This is one of the families or one of the heroes of the fortress. His wife, his mother, and 3 children. The youngest one was 2 years old. They were shot by the Nazis outside the fortress. However, here was their plan, the plan of the so-called lightning war, Blitzkrieg. But during the first month of the war, the Nazis captured several territories in the western part of the country, including Belarus, Ukraine, Moldavia, the Baltic republics, and the western part of Russia. All these territories were the parts of the Soviet Union at that moment.
डुप्लीकेट बनाया है
इसका शुरुआत तो बनाया नहीं जब
उन्होंने उसको इमेजिन करके बनाया है ये रियल में नहीं
Inside the village. It is one of the villages captured by the Nazis. And this village was ruined, burnt down. Many people were expelled from this village, and many people were taken to Germany, France, Austria, and other European countries as slave laborers.
कितना
I must
नेचुरल
tell
बनाया
you
है
that Nazis took 5,500,000 people as slave laborers, and only half of them were able to return to their motherland after the war. This movie illustrates the Nazi policy on the occupied territories. 25 million people lost their houses, and 4,100,000 people died of starvation, died of diseases, and they also died because they were shot. 7,500,000 people were shot by the Nazis. If you look back, you'll be able to see this typical Russian car.
अच्छा
हाँ
अच्छा है
विलेज में जाके
So we're inside this hut, and you can see that it is halfly burned. But we can imagine how it looked like. You can see that many things are turned upside down because the Nazis thought that in this modern house there were some precious things, some pieces of luxury, and we don't know anything about the owners of this hut because maybe they were shot, maybe they were taken away as slave laborers. We know only their surname because we see these documents. These are the Soviet documents, and Soviet documents were not used on the occupied territories, only the Nazi documents, such Ausweises. I suppose it would be better for me to come up close. You can see this Ausweis. This is a German word. It was used instead of passport. This Ausweis belonged to the lady which owned this hut. And this lady had the right to move through the village, to leave the village, to return to the village only with this document. And now we'll be able to pass through this village only with it.
नहीं
अच्छा, जान-
नहीं अभी लिटिल बिट थोड़ा मॉडर्न
अजय जानबूझ के जो अपनी जानबूझ के आग लगा के करने की फ्रांस वाले से ना पानी नहीं देता है वो सिस्टम जर्मनी आग
September of 1941, the occupied. Then they wanted to create several territories ruled by the Nazis, by special authorities, and you can see the special territories Reichskommissariats. They were to be ruled by the Nazis, and this one, Russland, included Belarusia and the Baltic republics. This one, Ukraine, had such territories as the part of Ukraine and the part of Belarusia. Yes, this one. And Transnistria, the part of Ukraine and Moldavia were ruled by Romanian authorities because Romania was the ally of Ukraine. He betrayed his motherland, and that is why he lives more or less well in this village.
बहन जी रुक
दबाना है ही नहीं इसमें
एग्रीमेंट हो रहा है
हाँ एग्रीमेंट एकदम धोखा दे दिया। हाँ धोखा दिया।
पाकिस्तान के साइड
carried away from Moscow because there was a real danger that they would capture.
ये क्या ट्रेन है?
500 factories were evacuated from the western to the eastern parts of the country, and together with them, 20,400,000 people were also evacuated. They traveled in special heated cargo vans. You can see this van, it is behind you, and they were taken away from such stations. And now we can come up closer. Now the Nazis often bombed the railway stations, they bombed the trains, and many people had to hide inside shelters. So sometimes people had to take only necessary things with them. Sometimes they took nothing, only money and documents. And they had no right to leave these trains because they went not only to save their lives but also to work at factories and to produce weapons. So evacuation was rather dangerous, and this process was very, very hard because they needed to send a lot of trains, approximately 30,000 trains and 1,500,000 coaches went to the eastern parts of the country.
तो जर्मनी आर्मी सिविल पीपल किल किया है और वुमेन चिल्ड्रन किल किया है। रशियन आर्मी कभी नहीं ऐसा किया। तो ये बॉम्ब दे दिया हॉस्पिटल ट्रेन के लिए।
यानी ये सारे पीपल
Okay, now
ये स्थिति आई है
water, and after that to go back to the coach, to the van, and to go to Siberia, to Europe, to different parts of the country. Movies you see here were made specially for our exposition. And yes, if you take it, this is the pistol machine gun of Spagin. How do you think, what do you think about its weight? 6 kilos, but it's also heavy. So not only adults but also kids. Also kids made some pistol machine guns.
सारे भाई आर्मी में गए तो चिल्ड्रन और लेडीज वेपन बनाए।
बनाने में
The age of children was 12. Of course, it was their free choice. It was the agreement with their parents. However, kids worked very hard. Sometimes they spent their nights here and temperatures were -3 or 4 degrees. They had to sleep in clothes, in their heads and so on.
Day, night, no holidays. No holidays.
तो सामने वाला क्या है?
परमाणु बम
नहीं नहीं
ना ना
क्या बम बम
नहीं नहीं मशीन का इंजन मशीन का इंजन जो बनाई
For an aircraft, for a bomber. And that machine is for making bullets.
हॉस्पिटल
इसके चले मिले
Funeral was intended for the wounded. Maybe you have already noticed that there is a blackboard here because many hospitals were created in the buildings of schools. Many schools were built in the 1930s with some plan that if the war starts, they would be able to turn to hospitals. So here you can see an operation. This operation is conducted by one of the most famous surgeons of the war period. 17 million soldiers were not only saved but also returned to the front line by the doctors.
कर दिया वॉर के टाइम में ऐसे ही करते हैं
इतने सारे लोग मरीज हो गए तो क्या करें तो इतना
टर्म्स कंडीशन कभी भी सरकार ले सकती है
किताब की पन्नी निकले सारे
And this movie was made specially for sending to the front line because some actors went to the front line, made performances. Among them were dancers, actors, singers, artists, and so on. If you look back, you will see maybe you recognize these figures. Do you recognize them? Hitler, Mussolini, and Churchill.
चर्चिल
Yes.
चर्चिल चर्चिल ब्रिटेन का जो था उसका प्राइम मिनिस्टर
हिटलर मुसोलिन चर्चिल मुसोलिन रशिया का हिटलर जर्मनी और ये लंदन का इंग्लैंड का चर्चिल लंदन का उस टाइम कहते थे दो दीवान व्यक्ति हैं पूरे वर्ल्ड में महात्मा गांधी और ये लाइब्रेरी
मुझे तो ओरिजिनल लग रही है
लाइब्रेरी हमारी ओरिजिनल लग रही है
नहीं
लाइब्रेरी
However, libraries continued to grow, though they were bombed and the buildings of the libraries were damaged.
संतोष भाई ने सुना या लेनिनग्राद पहले सेंट पीटर्सबर्ग पहले लेनिनग्राद था तो वहाँ सिटी में तो कॉल दिल्ली सब का लिया है खाने पीने
रशियन
Yes, of the war period, but in such flats, some members of secret resistance underground organizations met and they hid such radio sets. Radio sets, yes. Because they were afraid, the Nazis were afraid that people on the occupied territories would hear the news from the front line.
नहीं नहीं वैसे नहीं लगती सीनरी है लगती सीनरी है खोल के देखो हाँ इतना अच्छे ढंग से पता नहीं पड़ेगा
And many others.
आग जलाया
Russian aristocrat. This is a portrait painted by Kipriensky, one of the most famous. At the war period, and there was the Amber Room, the precious room which was presented to the Russian Emperor Peter the Great, and the Nazis took it away. The Nazis carried it away, and even today we don't know where it is. Nowadays we have only a replica of such a room.
नहीं ओरिजिनल लगे आज
आ जाओ कश्मीर में
हाँ बर्फ होती है बर्फ का सब वही सीन बनाया इन्होंने
ये दबा पड़ा
This city was occupied by the Nazis in 1941, and you can see how they ruined churches, monuments, everything. And when the city was liberated, civilians had perished in the city. They had been shot by the Nazis.
एक यहाँ से बर्फ में
Camps. The Nazis created many death camps where people were killed, and one of the most famous was Oswiecim. This one, with the inscription Arbeit macht frei, work liberates, work makes you free. However, this camp, they were killed by with the party for 1945, 80 years ago. The European Square, which comprises different monuments of different European cities, Budapest, Krakow, Vienna. This is the Imperial Bridge of Vienna, the Austrian capital, and these are all the cities which were liberated by the Soviet army. Soviet troops lost million officers and men, million lives during the liberation of Europe. That is why you can see these soldiers putting some inscriptions on the graves. And now we are in Berlin, the German capital.
अभी होने वाला है सब कुछ बाबा दिखा रहा है सब ये होने वाला है
So we are inside the Berlin house. One room belonged to the young German artist, and the other room belonged to the young girl. She likes music, but this room is ruined. And with the Reichstag, the German parliament. The group of the Russian soldiers set up the red banner on the Reichstag. The red banner is the symbol of the
सिंबल है किसी का सिंबल है
लिखा था कुछ स्लोगन लिखा था
रेखा रेखा
Yes, yes.
कौन सा दिन है
Yes, the red color was the symbol of the victory. And here you can see that the Soviet soldiers left their inscriptions on the walls, on the columns. We are from Moscow. The shortest road from Moscow to Moscow is through Berlin. If you like, I can.
जर्मनी जर्मनी की पार्लियामेंट है
उसको उड़ा दिया गया
फाइनल डेज ये राज्यसभा जर्मनी बिकॉज ये सबसे फेमस एक्सपोजिशन है तो यहाँ से
वो ले लिया
जनरल फोजा
डन जाओ
कहाँ चले गए भाई जी इधर से इधर से
Dear guests, be careful, please. Mind the steps. This is the hall of memory and sorrow. Here we remember those who perished or missed during the war. And during the war, the Soviet Union lost 26,600,000 people. 17,900,000 of them were civilians, and 8,700,000 were militants. So if you look up, you will see 2,600,000 bronze chains. Each chain symbolizes 10 people who perished, and crystals symbolize tears. And
कि आंसू दिखाया सिंबल ऑफ टीयर्स
in the center, there is a sculpture. It symbolizes a mother, a wife, a bride, a sister, a daughter, of a soldier who perished. Many people leave flowers here, and many official ceremonies took place here. On every year, they burn 1,418 candles because they love the whole. So this ceremony is many people's many countries in their fight against the Nazis. And we're very happy to see Indian guests, many tourists and official delegations come here.
आपकी आवाज भी गई
गाड़ी में जाना
खाना खाना खाना